Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Dio coming at you today to talk about the Byzantines and what we mean when we say the Byzantine Empire. I feel like I need to address this topic because my channel will heavily feature events in Byzantine history as well as ancient Greek and Roman history. But without any further ado, let's just get into the topic. So the most basic meaning of the Byzantine Empire was basically the Eastern Roman Empire after 476. That's after Romulus Augustulus abdicated in the west and he was not replaced by another emperor, and Odoacer took over, thus ending the Western Empire. The term itself, Byzantine, comes from Byzantium or Byzantion. That was the original name of Constantinople, or modern-day Istanbul, and the actual name of that city came from probably legendary character by the name of Byzas. It was said that he and a group of colonists from Greece, namely the city of Megara, founded the city in roughly the 7th century BCE. However, the Byzantines never called themselves by that name. In fact, they referred to themselves in Latin as Romani, or in Greek as Romei, and never Byzantini or Byzantini, because they always thought of themselves as Romans. The term Byzantine really only came to be used starting in the 16th century CE, and that was mainly to distinguish the medieval Eastern Roman Empire from the ancient Roman Empire. You may have noticed that I never referred to Justinian as a Byzantine emperor. I referred to him as Roman, and that's just a matter of personal preference. I feel like Justinian really carries on that Roman tradition, but in most books that you'll read on the subject, he will be referred to as a Byzantine emperor, so I just wanted to clear that up. Anyway, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about Byzantine studies and the interest in Byzantine history in the West. Originally, Westerners were not interested in Byzantine history at all. They were mostly focused on ancient Greek, Roman, basically the classics. However, almost all sources on the classics are classical Greek mythology, classic Greek history, anything Greek was transmitted through Byzantine manuscripts. And because of this, some scholars began to become very interested in the Byzantines themselves. The first Western scholar that we know of that was actually interested in Byzantine history for its own sake goes by the name of Hieronymus Wolff. He was a librarian and secretary in Augsburg, Germany, and he published the works of the Byzantine historians Ioannis Zonaras and Nikitas Honyatis. Shortly after that, Byzantine studies really took off in France in the courts of Louis XIII and the XIV. Most notably in the Colbert House in the Louvre, they began publishing the works of many Byzantine historians. Unfortunately, by the 18th century, with the growing religious skepticism of the Enlightenment, many historians and scholars began to view the Byzantine Empire with contempt because of the importance of the church in Byzantine affairs. For example, there's the French Charles Le Beau, who came out with the Histoire du Bas Empire, literally the history of the Low Empire. And of course, Edward Gibbon, who is famous for writing The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And a common motif between the two is basically that the Byzantine Empire was nothing but 1,000 years of decline. They saw them as superstitious, decadent, and ignorant, and basically inferior to the Roman Empire of classical times. Luckily, this sentiment didn't continue, and in the late 19th century and early 20th century, you have historians such as the Irish J.B. Bury or the Russian Alexander Vasilev, who wrote exhaustive histories on the Byzantines, and in fact, if you go to Wikipedia, a lot of articles about Byzantine history are based off of the works of these men, probably because they're in the public domain and the ease of access of these works. But moving on into the mid-20th century and now the 21st century, there has been a flourishing of interest in Byzantine studies. Now let's talk about some defining elements of the Byzantine Empire. For one, there's the Supreme Emperor. If you know anything about the history of the early Roman Empire, you'll know that the first emperor, Augustus, although he pretty much had supreme power, he gave the appearance that he was simply guiding the republic, and he referred to himself as princeps, which roughly translates to first individual, first citizen, and he had to publicly pay his respects to the Senate. Now, in the Byzantine Empire, the model was very different. For the most part, the emperor was a supreme ruler. He was seen as God's vicegerent on earth, and there was no attempt to even try to mask the emperor's power like Augustus tried to do. Now, from time to time, the emperor would get brutally murdered, which is not uncommon in Byzantine history, or even Roman history for that matter. But generally, the emperor was seen as a supreme ruler. Another defining element of the Byzantine Empire was the primacy of the church. Now, the church would play a major role in Byzantine affairs. There was a patriarch in Constantinople who was appointed by the emperor, and theological issues such as the three-chapter controversy or iconoclasm wouldn't simply be confined to the religious realm, but rather they would spill into the political realm and have real-world consequences. A third element was the importance of Roman law. Now, under Justinian, he came out with the Corpus Juris Civilis, and that was basically a codification, revision, and reformation of Roman law going all the way back to the times of the Republic. And later emperors would revise and expand upon this in the Greek language, actually, such as Leo III, who came out with the Eklogoi, and Leo VI, Leo the Wise, who put forth his Vasilika, which really drew from Justinian's Corpus Juris and systematized it in the Greek language, and that made it more accessible to Byzantine scholars and jurists, many of whom could not read or speak Latin. The last defining element that we'll talk about is the Greek language as a cultural and an administrative language. Now, originally, Latin was a language of administration, and Greek was the language of culture and commerce. But that would change as time went on, and the Greek language really went on to dominate the Byzantine Empire. Now, that's not to say that the empire was an exclusively Greek empire. Like almost all empires, it was multi-ethnic, and languages such as Armenian, Syriac, Isaurian, Coptic, and many others were spoken in the empire. However, all official business was done in Greek. Now, the question that we need to address now is, where do we draw the line? When does Byzantine history begin? And if you open up any book on Byzantine history or any textbook, most of them will begin with the reign of Diocletian, who ruled from 284 to 305 CE. And there's a number of reasons for this, mainly because those defining elements that we've just spoken of, they started to crystallize during this time, beginning with Diocletian and especially with Constantine, who reigned soon after. Even though no one would really consider Constantine or Diocletian as Byzantine emperors, Byzantine history really begins at this point. Earlier we spoke of a defining element of the Byzantine Empire was a supreme emperor. And in fact, the system that Diocletian created, you'll often hear historians refer to as the dominate. The Latin word for lord or master was dominus, and Diocletian expected his subjects to treat him as a lord or master, basically as a supreme ruler. This could be contrasted with Augustus's system, which was known as the Principate, where Augustus portrayed himself as merely the first among equals, the first citizen, or princeps like we talked about earlier. In order to deal with a number of problems that the Roman Empire was facing during his time, Diocletian created this system known as the Tetrarchy, where it consisted of 4 emperors, 2 senior emperors called Augusti, and 2 junior emperors called Caesars. In the east, Diocletian was Augustus with his Caesar Galerius, and in the west, Maximian was Augustus with his Caesar Constantius, and Constantius was the father of Constantine, Constantine the Great. You'll notice that Diocletian chose to reign in the east, and he reigned in the city of Nicomedia, and this really displays the more eastern focus of the empire from now on. The west was really already starting to decline in importance by this time, and even Rome wasn't really seen as the actual capital. Augustus in the west, Maximian, ruled from Milan, and Rome was just seen as a symbolic capital. It had carried no real strategic importance anymore. Let's fast forward a few decades, and Constantine comes to power, and in 312 he defeats the Western Emperor Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. And if you believe the Christian writers, he looked upon the sky and saw a sign of the cross in the sky and the words "in Teutonica," which means "in this conquer." So we had the cross, or the letters Hero, which are the first two letters in Greek of the word Christ, painted on his men's shields. And he was able to win the battle because he had the favor of the Christian God. Or at least that's what he believed, at least in the Christian accounts. So now that just leaves Constantine and a man named Licinius as emperors. And in 313, they issued the Edict of Milan, which effectively legalized Christianity and all other religions for that matter. It even stipulated that all the property that Christians lost during the persecutions during Diocletian's reign would have to be returned to them. Anyway, Constantine and Licinius do not get along, and in 324, Constantine defeats Licinius at the Battle of Chrysopolis. Now Constantine is the sole emperor, and Diocletian's tetrarchy has completely failed and fallen apart. As emperor, Constantine favored the Christian church. He subsidized the church with public funds, and he even intervened in theological matters such as the Donatist controversy in North Africa and the Council of Nicaea. In 330, he had the city of Byzantium christened as Constantinople, which would be the capital of the Byzantine Empire until 1453, when the Ottoman Turks took over. Now, the last topic I want to bring up just briefly is who was the first Byzantine emperor. I listed a few candidates here, and naturally Zeno would be one of them. He was emperor in 476 when the West fell. A lot of people point to Justin or Justinian as the first Byzantine emperor, or some even go as late as Heraclius, who reigned from 610 to 641, because around this time, Greek became the official administrative language in the empire. In my point of view, it really doesn't matter because the Byzantines always considered themselves Roman. It's just personal preference where you want to draw the line. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video on the subject. As always, I have my sources listed in the description, and I'm currently working on a video in Rome to Attila, which you will see in the very near future, as well as part 3 of Justinian's Italian campaign. Currently in the research phase of that, so it might be a little while before that comes out. Alright, thanks guys. Take care.